Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Lucy Tassell.
I'm Zara Seidler.
If you haven't checked your ATO account recently, I've got news for you. Over the weekend, your HECS debt went up by 3.2%. But wait, I hear you ask, didn't the government promise to take 20% off my debt after the election? In today's podcast, we'll explain how and why HECS works and how this planned discount is going to take effect. Zara, over this weekend, I spent a bit of time talking to my friends about our HECS debts.
Yep, so did I. I don't think you're alone there. It was
Yes.
the topic of conversation for many young people.
Yes.
And that's because our HECS debts went up
They went
over the
up.
weekend, as you said.
Yes.
Plus, there's also the question I think that naturally follows on every time we see that increase, which is, why are we paying off these loans when generations before us got university for free?
Exactly. Someone who got university for free was Prime Minister Anthony Albanese.
Yep.
And that is because there was once a time from 1974 to 1989 when the government subsidised the cost of uni degrees.
I thought it was longer, if I'm to
Yeah.
be honest. I didn't realise it was that short.
It is short. I wonder if it's because there's so many people who benefited from that era who went on to go into public life.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people in Parliament right now
Yeah,
who
I guess
were
that
at
age
uni.
would check out. Yeah,
Yes.
that makes sense.
Including, of course, the Prime Minister. Now, while this was great for students of that era, it has also been argued that this was an unfair burden on taxpayers.
Can you just unpack that? Why is free university unfair for taxpayers?
Yeah, our taxes are one of the main ways the government makes money. It's not the only way, but it's a big contributor. Some people would argue that when the government says it's making something free, it's not really free because one of the ways that the government gets money is via us.
Yeah,
So
the
an
taxpayer.
Exactly. So an example of this is the Medicare levy. It's part of the taxes that you pay. It's calculated at 2% of your overall income. The argument in favour of this is that everyone who pays taxes pays a tiny fraction of the whole, and then this being allowed to fund something like Medicare, it is argued, ends up benefiting us more than we end up paying. When the Bob Hawke government came to power in the early 80s, so in the middle of this program, it believed the government could not keep spending as much as it had on places at university because, in effect, government spending is in some way your spending. So by the government subsidising these free uni places, they were finding that they didn't want to be spending quite as much of taxpayer money when the government has many things to pay for.
Yeah.
Then in 1989, we have a new system. It's called the Higher Education Contribution Scheme, or HECS.
Yeah.
The education minister at the time was a guy named John Dawkins. And here's a little bit of what he said when he was introducing the bill to Parliament that would then kind of make this scheme happen. He said, people who benefit from higher education will be required to make a small contribution towards the cost of their study. The key features of the contribution scheme are an annual course charge of $1,800 per year of equivalent full-time study, payment arrangements based on personal capacity to pay, and a choice between lump sum payment with a 15% discount or payment through the taxation system once a person's income reaches around the level of average earnings in the Australian workforce. And he also noted the payments would be indexed to keep pace with inflation.
Okay, so I just want to recap where we are at. So for a period of time, university was free for students who were attending, and that's because the government was subsidising the cost of that, and that money was raised through taxpayers.
Yes.
We were ultimately in one very big circle all paying for that to occur.
Yes.
When Bob Hawke came to power, he said, we're spending too much on this. We are going to implement a new scheme.
Yes.
As we now understand it to be the HECS scheme.
Yes.
And from 1989 onwards, that scheme has been the dominant way that people take out a loan for higher education study.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
You passed.
So then you did say at the end there that the education minister at the time called it a contribution. I believe a small contribution is what you said. A lot of our listeners who have HECS, maybe they have a double degree, would not call it a small contribution.
Yes.
Talk me through that thinking.
Yeah, so even though in this podcast and in life we all call our student debts HECS, the scheme is actually called the Higher Education Loan Program, HELP. So you might hear it referred to as HECS HELP or HELP.
It was like only upon entering this job that I thought about the fact that it wasn't HEX. I just always thought it was like a hex on your home. Anyway, keep going. I'm interrupting this tangents.
It was only when I started this job that I realised it had been called HELP since I was in year 3. But that's
well, there you go.
No matter. The reason for this is because of changes made to the system under the Howard government.
Okay.
There were many different kinds of changes, but basically more kinds of debts were included in the scheme, different kinds of schools, different kinds of programs, and different degrees were able to cost different amounts, changing from that original $1,800 fee.
Okay, so under Howard, there were changes to the way the system worked.
Yes, so it became more of a loan and less of a contribution.
Gotcha.
It reflected in the name of the scheme. But in a lot of other senses, the original plan is still the case. All those things I outlined. So your repayments are based on how much you earn. That's still true.
Yeah.
You begin paying once you meet a certain threshold. That's still true. And the amount that you owe is indexed, which everyone would remember from a couple of years ago is still very much true. And that's what happened this past weekend.
That was an excellent segue into the news of the day, which is, of course, that our HECS debt went up due to indexation. Can you just talk our listeners through how indexation is calculated and what it's based on?
Hello, Billy here from TDA. We have just looked at our YouTube analytics and 95% of you who are watching our videos aren't subscribing. If you want to help independent media like us grow, the best way you can do that is by pressing subscribe. Thank you so much, and back to the video.
Basically, the idea of indexation is that your debt should increase with the value of money to reflect the actual value of money. This time, debts went up by 3.2% based on the rate of inflation. That's rising prices. This is historically what it's been based on. As I mentioned, John Dawkins said it should be based on the rate of inflation.
Yeah.
But as we would remember, our HECS debts jumped up by 7.1% in June 2023.
Just hearing that, it's just unbelievable.
Yes, because inflation was so high at the time. And at that time, the government passed a new law changing the rules, and that meant that indexation would be based on whichever is the lower of inflation or how much wages have risen by. So that's the wage price index.
So until that time, it had always been pegged to the rate of inflation, but because inflation was so high, there had to be an alternative here.
Yes, and they also they went back and applied the new rate of indexation to that increase from June 2023. And now, again, the government is planning to change the rules in another sense by promising to discount student debts.
I think this is where a bit of confusion, and I'd say rightly so, has kicked in for our listeners and for TDA readers, because throughout the election, the big pitch to young voters, especially from Labor, was we are going to cut your HECS debt by 20%.
Yeah.
And now that indexation has kicked in, our debt has gone up. A lot of people are saying, well, I thought it was getting cut. So can you just explain to us, when does that actually happen, or how does it happen?
Yeah, it's all about timing.
Yeah.
The first thing to know is that the discount can't happen until Parliament sits again. It's not doing that until the end of July. The government has, as we know, a really big majority in the lower house. It will
a huge majority.
The biggest ever, in fact. It will only need to negotiate with the Greens or the coalition to pass the bill in the upper house. Now, we don't know for sure, but we know that the Greens' policy is that all student debt should be wiped.
Yeah.
So I think we could suggest that they would be open to negotiating with the government.
Yeah.
I haven't called them up to ask, but I think we will hear from them again ahead of Parliament sitting.
Yeah.
Then, if/when the bill passes...
Which you're saying is very likely.
Yes, and the government also, I should note, has said they want to do this as soon as possible.
Yeah, as their first kind of action item.
If/when it passes, the reduction will be applied automatically by the ATO. It will apply to the amount of your loan before indexation. If you pay it off in between indexation, so now, and the end of the financial year this month, you will get the discount rebated in your tax return, assuming you get a return and not a bill. The indexation applied this weekend will then be recalculated based on the new reduced loan amount.
Okay.
So I think it's time to do a bit of maths.
Please.
Unfortunately.
Let's hold hands and do it together.
So say you have a loan of $10,000.
Yeah.
As of this weekend, your debt went up 3.2% to $10,320. When the discount comes into effect, it reduces your pre-indexation debt to $8,000, and then the indexation is recalculated and reapplied, so your final result will be $8,256.
And can I just jump in here? So no one has to actually do anything in order to access that cut.
It happens automatically.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then again, as I said, the government has committed to bringing it forward basically as soon as they walk into the House of Representatives. So we could be seeing it fairly soon.
Yeah, really interesting there. Lucy, before we go, I do just want to ask, is the government planning to change anything else about our HECS system? Because you said that they've already changed the way that indexation is pegged or what it's pegged to. Are there any other changes coming down the line that we know about?
There's one more thing they want to change, which is raising the threshold of when you need to start paying it back. So right now you need to be earning $51,500 a year to begin repaying your debt. And the government wants to increase that to $67,000 per year, which is quite a jump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. The government has a big agenda of election commitments. And as we have said many times before, it's as important to hold the government to account post-election as it is during an election period. So we will be keeping track of those commitments and if and when they come to fruition. Thanks for explaining, Lucy.
Thanks, Zara.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of The Daily Aus. We will, of course, be back later today with your afternoon headlines. But until then, have a good day.